friends, welcome back to my channel. My name is Chandra and I make videos about reading, writing, and all things books. Today's video is a channel update. You've been following a decrease in the content that I've been creating, and there's been a reason for that. I've been really burnt out. Over the past year, 2021, I spent just working at a furious pace, which was awesome. I learned a ton. I wrote 3 books and then almost finished a 4th, and it was awesome. But one of the things that I learned about myself is pacing, and that was way too much. The big thing I had talked about as well was starting on the editing process and being able to focus on that so that I'm not just drafting a bunch of books, but I'm actually getting something done as far as editing and moving towards my ultimate goal of publishing a book. So from that, I took some time to reevaluate what I've been working on, what I've been doing, and I wanted to just do a channel update to share the focus and direction. So that's the first point, is my focus and direction. My original mission of this channel was to make videos about reading, writing, and all things books. And I feel like I've done really well with that, but also I've been kind of slipping away from that in some ways, and I want to refocus on that. So the first thing is the direction of my reading. I have shared some of what I've been reading, but there's also been a change in that I'm focusing a lot on history and research. So my reading has been really research related, and even though I'm reading a lot of fiction, I would say a lot of it isn't as relevant to be shared. Like, you know, I've got my book reviews that I post on Goodreads and things of that nature. So if you're really interested in that content, although I may mention certain aspects or certain things from my writing, or from my reading rather, that relate to my writing, I'm not going to share everything I read because it's not all pertinent. However, as my reading has become more relevant to what I'm working on, I do want to share more of that. So a lot of my content is going to be focused in that direction. And then because it's been so heavy on the research side, a lot of what I'm going to be sharing is research related. And since right now I'm primarily focused on historical fiction, a lot of my content is going to be history related and historical fiction related because that's where I am. And I know earlier in my journey I was really focused on the basics of writing, which is great, but it's not really where I am anymore. I've started to really niche down. So my content is also going to be a bit more niche as it relates specifically to writing historical fiction. The third thing is writing focus. I am editing my sci-fi project intermittently. That's looked really different than I expected it to, and that's okay. I'm still making progress on that, but I don't writing sci-fi for me doesn't require the same level of research that historical fiction does. There's still a lot to do in that setting, but I don't have as much to share on it right now because I'm still early on in the editing process, and I do have several videos on what my editing process looks like, and that's just what I'm doing. So I don't need to necessarily go over it again because I'm following my process with that, and it works really well for me so far. The next thing is my writing focus has, like I said previously, been historical fiction. And so I'm going to be going a little more in depth to that because I'm using some new drafting methods and I'm rewriting and re-outlining everything. So I would like to talk a bit about that, but I don't think it's necessarily going to take up a ton of time. Like, I can just go over it pretty quickly in some of the same formats that I've done my other videos and share the information without, you know, repeating myself a ton. Number 4, all the books. So part of my original goal was to talk about all things books. And some of that requires follow-up, right? Because a lot of what I have a video, you know, why you shouldn't write and research at the same time. Well, it probably, Dobby, don't you do it. Part of what I've done in that it probably looks like now I'm going back on that, and I'm not, because I have drafted. So I'd never really gotten into, okay, I've done the world building. What does it look like now where I've drafted? What does the researching actually look like? So that's going to be a lot of my content is going to be focused on the research aspects, how I do my research, where I find everything, all of those kinds of things. So I'm going to focus a little more in that direction because it also will give me a lot of opportunity to share. So I want to show how the research comes into the draft, where I talked about not doing both at the same time. Well, it's actually now time for me to research, and I want to talk about that because I'm having an absolute blast doing the research. So now that I need to know more, now that I've done all the world building and everything, what comes next? So the other part of this is that I realized that a lot of my characters were one-dimensional, and not just the characters, but the world building. So my focus has to switch to that. And one of the ways to develop the characters is to understand the world that they're living in. So all of my research is going in that direction, understanding the world that they're living in and fleshing out some of the world building that didn't need to be examined initially because I didn't know exactly what aspects are going to come into play. So some of it is general information for the time period. Some of it is actually very focused and specific to the story that I've told. Through this process, I've found some flaws in the story. Additional world building has come into play where I've found out that some of the things that I had assumed were incorrect, which is fine because I knew that was going to happen. But now that I'm actually seeing what those differences are, it does require more research. One of those things is like initially in one of the early scenes, I had a character who's walking along bluffs. When I researched more on the setting, I found out where I was like specifically, okay, I need to know exactly where this takes place. I found out that in that area, there weren't bluffs, it was more swampy. So I needed to do more research on that. And these are the kinds of details and small flaws that I'm finding in the story, but I do want to have my stories be as historically accurate as possible. That's the kind of historical fiction that I enjoy. So that's the fifth thing. This is the next part of my writing journey, really fleshing out my process for taking things to the next level, where I've done a lot of world building, I've done the basic research around the environment, and I've gotten all of that ironed out. But in order to proceed, I now have to have more in-depth knowledge of the world and the time frame, and that's where my content's gonna go. So I'm really excited to share the research and the process. I will not be posting videos as frequently as I had been previously. It's not feasible for the amount of research I've been doing, and also with some of the other changes in my life, that's not how the cookie is gonna crumble. But that's okay, and I'm really excited for what is up and coming. So thank you so much for watching my video, and I will see you next time. Bye.